The train lurched to a stop in Agua Caliente, Arizona Territory, on a scorching July afternoon in 1882. And Zara Sutton stepped onto the platform with trembling hands clutching a carpet bag that contained everything she owned in this world, knowing she was about to meet a stranger she had promised to marry. The dust swirled around her black traveling dress as she scanned the small crowd gathered at the station, searching for a man named Quinn Calloway, who had written her 3 careful letters over the past 4 months. Each letter had been respectful, almost formal, describing his cattle ranch 10 miles outside of town and his need for a wife to help manage the household. He had never once mentioned love, which had suited Zara just fine at the time. Love had gotten her mother killed when her father's fists found their target one too many times, and love had made her older sister stay with a man who drank away every penny they had. Zara had wanted safety and distance from St. Louis, and Quinn Calloway's letters had promised both. A tall man separated himself from the covered walkway outside the general store, his boots kicking up small clouds of dirt as he approached. He wore dusty denim pants, a faded blue shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed most of his face. His shoulders were broad, his stride confident, and something about the way he moved made Zara's heart hammer against her ribs. "Miss Sutton." His voice was deep, roughened by sun and wind. Yes. Her own voice came out barely above a whisper. He removed his hat, revealing sun-bronzed skin, dark brown hair that needed cutting, and eyes the color of whiskey in sunlight. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps 27 or 28, with a strong jaw and a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled. There was a hardness to his features that made her take an involuntary step backward. "Quinn Calloway, welcome to Agua Caliente." He nodded toward a wagon hitched to 2 sturdy horses. "We should get moving before dark. It's a 2-hour drive to the ranch." She followed him to the wagon, acutely aware that she was now entirely at this stranger's mercy. He lifted her trunk and carpet bag into the back with ease, then offered his hand to help her up onto the wooden seat. His palm was calloused, his grip firm but not crushing. He released her the moment she was seated and walked around to climb up beside her. The town disappeared behind them as they headed northwest into open country, dotted with mesquite and sagebrush. The sun beat down mercilessly, and Zara was grateful for her bonnet, though sweat still trickled down her spine. Quinn drove in silence, his attention on the rough road ahead. "Your letters mentioned you had a housekeeper," Zara finally said, desperate to fill the oppressive quiet. "Had Mrs. Chen returned to California last month to be with her daughter who's expecting. That's partly why I needed." He trailed off, his jaw tightening. "Why I wrote to the agency. So she was a necessity, nothing more." Zara swallowed against the dryness in her throat. "I can cook and clean. I managed my aunt's boarding house for 3 years. "Good." Another long silence stretched between them. Zara studied the landscape, so different from Missouri's green hills and thick forests. Everything here was brown and gold and endless, the sky so vast it made her feel insignificant. Mountains rose in the purple distance, jagged and ancient. "We'll be married tomorrow in town," Quinn said abruptly. "Judge Patterson comes through on Saturdays. I've already made the arrangements." "Tomorrow?" Zara's hands clenched in her lap. "So soon? No point in waiting." "You came here to be my wife." He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Unless you've changed your mind." She thought about the return ticket she could not afford, the borrowed money that had gotten her this far, the nothing that waited for her back in St. Louis. "No. I have not changed my mind." "Then tomorrow it is." The ranch appeared as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. The main house was larger than Zara had expected, built of adobe with a wooden porch that wrapped around 2 sides. Several outbuildings stood nearby, including a barn, a stable, and what looked like a bunkhouse. She could see cattle grazing in a distant pasture, and the whole property had an air of prosperity that surprised her given Quinn's sparse letters. Quinn pulled the wagon up to the house and jumped down, then came around to help her descend. His hands spanned her waist as he lifted her, setting her on the ground with careful precision. For just a moment, they stood close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes, could smell the scent of leather and sage that clung to him. He stepped back quickly, clearing his throat. "I'll show you the house." The interior was neat but Spartan, with whitewashed walls and simple furniture. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. Quinn led her down a short hallway, pointing out a washroom and then stopping at a closed door. "This is the main bedroom. You can have it." He opened the door to reveal a spacious room with a large bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a wardrobe, a dresser, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. "I'll take the smaller room across the hall." Zara stared at him. "But we're to be married." His jaw worked, and he looked away. "I know what I wrote in those letters, Miss Sutton, but I want you to know I'm not the kind of man who forces himself on a woman. We can share a name and a house without sharing a bed until you're ready, if you're ever ready." The words should have comforted her, but instead they sparked a confusing mixture of relief and something that felt uncomfortably like disappointment. "That's very considerate. It's decent, not considerate." He moved past her, carrying her trunk into the room. "There's a lock on the door if it makes you feel safer." After he left, Zara sat on the edge of the bed and tried to calm her racing thoughts. She had traveled 1,000 miles to marry a stranger, and now that stranger was offering her a reprieve she had not asked for. She should feel grateful, relieved even, but instead she felt more uncertain than ever. That night, Quinn prepared a simple supper of beans, cornbread, and coffee. They ate at the kitchen table with a gulf of silence between them. Afterward, Zara washed the dishes while Quinn went outside to check on the horses. When he came back in, his face was tight with exhaustion. "I'll be up before dawn," he said, pausing at the hallway entrance. "Help yourself to whatever you need. There's food in the pantry, coffee in the tin by the stove." "Thank you." Zara dried her hands on a cloth. "Good night, Mr. Calloway." "Quinn," he said quietly. "You might as well call me Quinn." She nodded. "Good night, Quinn." In her room, Zara changed into her nightgown and stood for a long moment looking at the door. Then, feeling foolish but unable to stop herself, she turned the key in the lock. The soft click seemed to echo in the silence. She climbed into bed and lay staring at the ceiling, wondering what kind of life she had chosen and whether she would ever feel safe enough to unlock that door. The next morning, she woke to the sound of boots in the hallway and then the front door closing. Dawn was just breaking, painting the sky pink and gold. Zara rose and dressed quickly, choosing her best dress, a deep green calico that brought out the color of her eyes. She brushed and pinned her dark blonde hair, studying her reflection in the small mirror above the dresser. At 22, she still had the rounded cheeks of youth, but her green eyes held shadows that made her look older. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found a note on the kitchen table in strong, slanted handwriting. "Had to check the south fence. Back by 8. Coffee's hot." Zara poured herself a cup and stood by the window, watching the sun climb higher. The land was already shimmering with heat, the air so dry it seemed to pull moisture from her skin. She had just started exploring the pantry when she heard horses approaching. Through the window, she saw Quinn riding in with 2 other men, both weathered and dust-covered. They dismounted near the barn, and Quinn spoke with them briefly before heading toward the house. He entered through the back door, pulling off his hat. "Those are my ranch hands, Tom and Pedro. They live in the bunkhouse. Good men, but they keep to themselves mostly." He moved to the wash basin and cleaned his hands and face. "You ready to go to town?" "Yes." The ride back to Agua Caliente felt different in daylight, though no less tense. Quinn had changed into clean clothes, dark pants and a white shirt that made his tanned skin seem even darker. He had shaved, and Zara caught herself glancing at his profile when she thought he was not looking, noticing the strong line of his nose, the way his hair curled slightly at his collar. Judge Patterson was a rotund man with kind eyes and a booming voice. The ceremony took place in his office above the bank, with his clerk and the bank manager's wife serving as witnesses. Zara listened to herself repeat vows that bound her to this silent, serious man beside her, and when Quinn slipped a simple gold band on her finger, she felt the weight of it like a shackle. "You may kiss your bride," Judge Patterson announced cheerfully. Quinn turned to her, his expression carefully neutral. He leaned down and pressed his lips to her cheek, so briefly that it barely counted as a kiss. The witnesses applauded politely, and then it was done. Zara Sutton had ceased to exist, replaced by Zara Calloway, wife of a man she did not know. They stopped at the general store so Quinn could pick up supplies and introduce Zara to the proprietor, a talkative man named Harold Benson who ran the store with his wife, Martha. Martha was a plump, motherly woman who immediately took Zara's hands in her own. "Oh, you poor dear, arriving in this heat. You must come to our Sunday socials. All the ranch wives gather at the church for quilting and gossip." She winked conspiratorially. "Mostly gossip, if I'm being honest." "That sounds lovely," Zara managed, though the thought of facing a room full of curious strangers made her stomach twist. On the ride back to the ranch, Quinn was even quieter than usual. Zara watched the play of muscles in his forearms as he handled the reins and tried to imagine a future where they spoke easily, where the silence between them was comfortable rather than suffocating. "My father had a temper," she said suddenly, surprising herself. "He hurt my mother until she could not be hurt anymore. I watched it happen for 16 years. Quinn's hands tightened on the reins, but he did not look at her. "I'm sorry. I just need you to know why I might seem frightened sometimes. It's not you specifically. It's just that I've learned to be careful around men." He was quiet for so long she thought he would not respond. Then he said, "My father was a drunk who gambled away everything we had. My mother worked herself to death trying to hold us together. I swore I'd never be like him, that I'd build something solid and real. This ranch, it's everything to me. I need help running it, need someone to manage the house so I can focus on the cattle and the land. But I don't need a wife who flinches every time I walk into a room." He finally looked at her, his eyes steady. "So you lock that door every night if you need to. Lock it for a month, a year, forever. I won't complain and I won't ask for what you're not willing to give." Tears burned behind Zara's eyes, but she blinked them away. "Thank you." "Nothing to thank me for. It's just how things are." That night, after another quiet supper, Zara retreated to her room and locked the door again. She told herself it was just a precaution, that she needed time to adjust, but she could not shake the feeling that she was trapping herself as much as protecting herself. She woke sometime past midnight to the sound of footsteps in the hall. They paused outside her door and her heart began to race. She held her breath, waiting, but after a long moment the footsteps continued to the room across the hall. She heard Quinn's door open and close, heard the creak of his bed frame. Then silence. The pattern established itself over the following days. Quinn rose before dawn and worked until dusk, coming in only for the midday meal that Zara prepared. He was unfailingly polite, thanking her for the food, commenting on the improvements she made to the house, but maintaining a careful distance. And every night, Zara locked her bedroom door. On the fourth night, she was reading in bed when she heard footsteps approach her door. She tensed, waiting for a knock that did not come. Instead, she heard a soft scraping sound. When she worked up the courage to investigate, she found a plate on the floor outside her door. On it were 2 biscuits, a thick slice of ham, and a small jar of honey. The next morning at breakfast, Quinn did not mention it. Zara wanted to ask why he had left food outside her door like she was some sort of frightened animal, but the words stuck in her throat. That night, it happened again. After she locked her door, she eventually heard his footsteps and the gentle sound of a plate being set down. This time, when she opened the door, she found beef stew still steaming in a bowl, fresh bread, and an apple. On the 6th night, Zara did not wait. When she heard him approach, she quickly unlocked the door and pulled it open. Quinn stood there with a plate in his hands, surprise flickering across his features. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. He looked down at the plate, then back at her. "Figured you might get hungry in the night. It's a long time from supper to breakfast." "I'm not a prisoner, Quinn. I could come to the kitchen myself if I was hungry." "I know that." He held out the plate. "But I thought maybe it was easier this way, less chance you'd run into me in the dark and get scared." She took the plate, her fingers brushing his. "I'm not as fragile as you think." "Didn't say you were fragile. Said you'd been hurt, and people who have been hurt deserve gentleness." He stepped back. "Good night, Zara." She watched him walk to his room, watched the way his broad shoulders filled the doorway before he disappeared inside. Then she went back into her own room, looked at the lock for a long moment, but could not bring herself to turn the key. The supper plate became a nightly ritual. Quinn would bring it, set it outside her door if it was locked, hand it to her if she was waiting. They began to exchange a few words during these brief encounters, careful conversations about the weather, the cattle, the small happenings of the day. "Tom thinks we should move the herd to the north pasture," Quinn said one night, holding out a plate of chicken and potatoes. "Why?" Zara accepted the plate, noticing how careful he was not to let their hands touch. "Better grass up there, and there's a creek that runs year-round, but it means more riding to check on them." "Will you be gone overnight?" Something flickered in his eyes. "Would that worry you?" She considered the question honestly. "I suppose it would. I'm still learning the land, learning where things are. If something happened, I would not know what to do." "Nothing's going to happen. Tom and Pedro are here, and the nearest neighbors are only 5 miles south. The Hendersons, good people. But I wasn't planning on staying out overnight anyway. Too much work here." He hesitated, then added, "You settling in all right? I know it's different from city life. It's quieter. I like the quiet." She glanced past him at his open bedroom door, catching a glimpse of the narrow bed, the single chair, the Spartan accommodations he had chosen for himself while giving her the best room. "Quinn, this arrangement, it's not fair to you. Fair enough for me. You gave me the main bedroom. You're the lady of the house. Made sense. I'm your wife." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something raw and vulnerable in his expression before he shuddered it away. "In name only, that was the deal. I never asked for that deal." "No, but you locked the door, which told me everything I needed to know." His voice was gentle, without accusation. "I'm a patient man, Zara. I can wait." "Wait for what?" "For you to stop being afraid of me." The words hung between them, honest and painful. Zara wanted to tell him she was not afraid anymore, but it would have been a lie. She was not afraid of him specifically, but she was afraid of what marriage meant, of the vulnerability it required, of giving someone the power to hurt her. "Good night," she whispered. "Good night." She closed the door but left it unlocked. The next morning she woke to find Quinn already gone and a note on the kitchen table. Riding to North Pasture with Tom and Pedro, back by supper. There's fresh eggs in the basket. Zara spent the day cleaning, exploring the ranch buildings, getting her bearings. She found Quinn's office, a small room off the main living area filled with ledgers and papers. She did not snoop, but she could not help noticing how meticulous his record-keeping was, how every expense and sale was carefully noted in his precise handwriting. She made a special effort with supper, frying chicken the way her aunt had taught her, making biscuits from scratch, even attempting a dried apple pie. When Quinn came in as the sun was setting, dusty and tired, his eyes widened at the spread on the table. "This looks like a feast." "I wanted to make something nice." She served him a plate, watching nervously as he took the first bite. He closed his eyes briefly. "This is the best meal I've had in months, maybe years." Warmth bloomed in her chest. "Really, Mrs. Chen was a fine cook, but this reminds me of how my mother used to make chicken before." He trailed off, setting down his fork, before everything fell apart. They ate in companionable silence, and afterward, Quinn insisted on helping with the dishes despite Zara's protests. They worked side by side at the wash basin, and she was acutely aware of his presence, the heat of his body, the way his shoulder occasionally brushed hers. "I'm going to town on Wednesday," he said, drying a plate. "Thought you might want to come along, maybe join that quilting circle Martha mentioned. I'm not much of a quilter." "Don't think that matters much. Sounds like it's more about getting out of the house, talking to other women." He glanced at her. "Might be good for you to have friends out here." She nodded slowly. "All right, I'll go." That night, when Quinn brought her supper plate, he found her door standing open. She was sitting on her bed with a book in her lap, and she smiled at him as he entered. "You can just call me for supper," she said. "I don't need a separate plate anymore." He looked at the open door, then at her. "You sure?" "I'm sure." Something shifted in his expression, a subtle relaxing of the lines around his eyes. "All right then, I'll remember that." But the next night he brought a plate anyway, and the night after that. Zara realized it had become less about her fear and more about these few minutes they carved out of each day, standing in her doorway or sitting on the edge of her bed, talking in low voices as darkness settled over the ranch. Wednesday arrived hot and cloudless. Zara dressed in her Sunday best, and Quinn wore the same white shirt he had married her in. The ride to town felt different now, the silences less oppressive and more companionable. Quinn pointed out landmarks, told her the names of the distant mountains, explained how the seasonal rains transformed the landscape. The quilting circle met in a room behind the church, and Zara found herself welcomed by a group of 7 women ranging in age from mid-20s to elderly. Martha Benson presided over the gathering with cheerful authority, and soon Zara was seated between a shy young woman named Emily Porter and a sharp-eyed older woman named Constance Hayes. "So you're Quinn Calloway's mail-order bride," Constance said without preamble. "How's that working out for you?" Zara felt her cheeks heat. "It's an adjustment, but I'm managing." "Quinn's a good man," Emily offered softly. She was about Zara's age, with soft brown eyes and work-worn hands. "My husband, Jack, he says Quinn's the most honest rancher in the territory. Never cheats on a deal, always pays his hands fair wages." "Being honest and being a good husband are 2 different things," Constance pointed out. "A man can be a saint in public and a devil at home." "Quinn's not like that," Zara said, surprising herself with her vehemence. "He's been nothing but kind and respectful." Martha smiled knowingly. "Sounds like someone's getting sweet on her husband. I barely know him." "Sometimes that's the best way to start. No false expectations, no grand illusions. Just 2 people learning each other day by day." Martha threaded her needle with practiced ease. "My Harold and I married within a week of meeting. That was 30 years ago. Best decision I ever made was taking a chance on that fumbling shopkeeper's son. The afternoon passed pleasantly, and Zara found herself relaxing in the company of these frontier women who asked frank questions, but offered genuine friendship in return. Emily invited her to visit the Porter Ranch, and even Constance grudgingly admitted that Zara seemed like she had a good head on her shoulders. When Zara met Quinn outside the general store, she was smiling, and she saw his eyes widen slightly at the sight. "Had a good time?" he asked. "I did." "They're nice women." "Good, I'm glad." He helped her into the wagon, his hand steady on her elbow. "I picked up some things you might need for the house. Martha helped me choose, so if they're wrong, blame her." In the back of the wagon, Zara found a new set of cooking pots, some fabric in cheerful patterns, a box of novels from the small lending library, and a jar of expensive hand cream. "Quinn, this is too much." "It's not. You've been working hard making that house a home. Figured you deserved some things of your own." He clicked to the horses and they started moving. "Besides, a man should provide for his wife. Even a wife in name only." He was quiet for a moment. "You're more than that. Maybe we haven't figured out exactly what we are yet, but you're more than just a name on paper." That night, Zara left her door open while she changed into her nightgown, and when Quinn brought her supper plate, she invited him to sit in the chair by the window while she ate. They talked about the women at the quilting circle, about the ranch, about their childhoods in careful, edited versions that left out the worst parts. "I always wanted land," Quinn said, gazing out at the darkening landscape. "Not to prove anything or get rich, though I won't say I mind the profit. I wanted something that was mine, something no one could take away or gamble off or destroy. This ranch, it's permanent in a way nothing else in my life ever was. I understand that. I wanted safety. I wanted to wake up in the morning without being afraid of what the day would bring." "And do you feel safe here?" Zara set down her plate and looked at him, really looked at him. He sat with his hat in his hands, turning it slowly, his profile limned in moonlight. He was handsome in a rough-hewn way, all hard planes and angles, but there was a softness in his eyes when he looked at her, a tenderness that made her heart ache. "Yes," she said softly. "I do." He smiled then, a rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. "Good, that's real good." After he left, Zara lay in bed thinking about that smile, about the way her heart had stuttered when she saw it. She was growing attached to him, she realized, with a mixture of wonder and fear. This serious, careful man who brought her supper plates and gave her space and never demanded anything she was not ready to give. The following week brought a crisis that changed everything. Zara was hanging laundry when she heard shouting from the direction of the barn. She dropped the sheet she was holding and ran, arriving to find Tom bent over Pedro, who was lying on the ground with his leg twisted at an unnatural angle. "Horse spooked," Tom said grimly. "Threw him into the fence. I think his leg's broken bad." Quinn came running from the far pasture, took one look at Pedro and started barking orders. "Tom, ride to town and fetch Doc Morrison. Zara, I need bandages, whiskey, and something for him to bite on." She ran to the house, her mind racing. By the time she returned, Quinn had carried Pedro into the bunkhouse and laid him on his bed. The young man's face was gray with pain, sweat beading on his forehead. "This is going to hurt," Quinn told him in Spanish, then repeated it in English for Zara's benefit. He looked at her. "I need to set the bone before the doc gets here, or he might lose the leg. Can you help me?" Zara wanted to say no, wanted to run from the sight of Pedro's mangled leg and the smell of blood and fear, but Quinn's eyes were steady on hers, trusting her. "Tell me what to do," she said. For the next hour, she held Pedro's hand and gave him whiskey and helped Quinn as he carefully, methodically set the broken bone. Pedro screamed and then passed out, which Quinn said was a mercy. By the time Doc Morrison arrived in his buggy, the leg was splinted and bandaged, and Pedro was sleeping fitfully. The doctor examined Quinn's work and nodded approvingly. "You did a fine job. Leg should heal clean if he stays off it for the next 6 weeks." After the doctor left and Tom took over watching Pedro, Quinn and Zara walked back to the house in silence. She was shaking now that the crisis had passed, adrenaline draining away and leaving her hollow. "You did good," Quinn said quietly. "Real good. A lot of women would have fainted or run. I almost did both. But you didn't. You stayed and you helped." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Thank you, Zara. I couldn't have done it without you." She looked up at him, at the pride and gratitude in his eyes, and something inside her shifted and settled. "We're partners in this, aren't we? The ranch, the life here. Partners. If you want to be, I do." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingertips brushed her cheek, calloused and warm. "You've got blood on your dress." She looked down at the rusty stains. "I'll wash it out. I'll buy you a new one. You don't have to do that, I know, but I want to." His hand lingered near her face, not quite touching. "I want to give you things, Zara, nice things. Everything you deserve." Her breath caught. "Quinn." He dropped his hand and stepped back. "Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself." "No." She caught his hand, surprising them both. "You're not." That night, when Quinn brought her supper plate, Zara asked him to stay and eat with her. He fetched his own plate and sat beside her on the bed, their shoulders touching as they ate. They talked until late into the night, and when Quinn finally stood to leave, Zara caught his hand again. "Thank you for the suppers," she said. "For being patient with me. For seeing me as more than just a necessity. You were never just a necessity." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "From the first letter you wrote, I knew you were someone special. You wrote about wanting safety, but you also wrote about wanting purpose, about needing to be useful and seen. That told me you weren't running from something, you were running towards something, toward a life that meant something. And have I found it? I hope so. I hope we both have." He left then, but the warmth of his hand stayed with her long after his door closed across the hall. Over the next few weeks, as Pedro healed and summer deepened into its most brutal heat, Zara and Quinn grew closer in small, incremental ways. They took meals together, worked side by side in the vegetable garden she planted, sat on the porch in the evenings watching the sun paint the mountains gold and purple. Quinn still brought her a supper plate each night, even though she ate supper with him in the kitchen. And she began to understand that it was his way of checking on her, of ensuring she had everything she needed, of carving out those few private minutes when they could speak without the day's work pressing in on them. One evening in late August, as they sat on the porch with glasses of lemonade, Quinn said, "There's a dance in town on Saturday, Harvest Festival. I was thinking maybe we could go." Zara looked at him in surprise. "A dance?" "Well, there's food and music and dancing, but mostly it's an excuse for folks to gather and celebrate making it through another summer." He shifted in his chair, suddenly awkward. "I'm not much of a dancer, but I thought you might enjoy it." I would like that very much." Saturday arrived with cooler temperatures and clouds building over the mountains, promising rain. Zara wore her best dress, the green calico, and took extra care with her hair. When she emerged from her room, Quinn was waiting in the kitchen wearing dark pants, a crisp white shirt, and a string tie. He had shaved and combed his hair, and the sight of him made her stomach flutter. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice rough. "Thank you. You look very handsome." The ride to town was filled with anticipation, and when they arrived, the streets were already crowded with wagons and horses. The festival was being held in a large open area behind the church, with tables laden with food, lanterns strung between poles, and a group of musicians tuning their instruments on a makeshift stage. Martha Benson spotted them immediately and hurried over. "Oh, don't you two make a lovely couple?" "Zara, wait until you try my peach cobbler. And Quinn, I hope you're planning to dance with that pretty wife of yours." Quinn's ears reddened, but he smiled. "That's the plan." They mingled with the crowd, and Zara was pleased to recognize many faces from the quilting circle. Emily Porter introduced her husband, Jack, a lean young man with a quick smile. Judge Patterson was there with his wife, and even Doc Morrison made an appearance, already sampling the food. When the music started, Quinn led Zara to the dance area. He had not lied about his dancing skills. He was competent but stiff, clearly uncomfortable with so many eyes on them. But he held her carefully, one hand on her waist and the other clasping hers, and they moved together in a simple waltz. "You're doing fine," she murmured. "I'm trying not to step on your feet. You haven't yet." He relaxed slightly, and they completed the dance without incident. When it ended, several other men approached asking for dances, and Quinn graciously stepped aside, though Zara noticed he never took his eyes off her. She danced with Jack Porter, with Harold Benson, with a few other ranchers and townsfolk. But when a stranger approached, a tall man with slicked back hair and an oily smile, she felt Quinn materialize at her elbow. "This one's mine," Quinn said mildly, but there was steel in his voice. The stranger backed off, and Quinn pulled Zara into his arms for another waltz. "Who was that?" she asked. "Brett Finch. Owns the Silver Dollar Saloon. He's got a reputation for bothering women." Quinn's jaw was tight. "Didn't like the way he was looking at you. Like I was a piece of meat." "Something like that." She moved closer, closing the distance between them until they were nearly embracing. "I'm glad you came over." His hand tightened on her waist. "You're my wife. I look after what's mine." "Is that what I am? Yours?" He looked down at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Only if you want to be." "I'm starting to think I do." They danced 2 more dances, and then Quinn suggested they get some food. They filled plates and found a quiet spot under a cottonwood tree away from the main crowd. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the lanterns were beginning to glow. "This was a good idea," Zara said, watching couples whirl past. "I'm glad we came." "Me too." Quinn set down his plate. "Zara, I need to tell you something." Her heart skipped. "What is it?" "When I wrote to that agency, I told myself I just needed a housekeeper, someone to share the work. I convinced myself that was enough, that I didn't need or want anything more than a practical arrangement." He turned to face her fully. "But I was lying to myself. From the moment you stepped off that train, looking scared and brave at the same time, I wanted more. I wanted this to be real." "Quinn, let me finish. I know you've been hurt, and I know you need time. I'm not asking you to change anything. I'll keep sleeping in that smaller room, keep bringing you supper plates, keep giving you all the space you need. But I wanted you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Tears pricked her eyes. "What if I'm never ready? What if I'm too broken?" "You're not broken. You're healing, and that takes time." He reached out and gently wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "I can wait. I'll wait as long as you need. You deserve better than a wife who locks her bedroom door." "I haven't heard that lock turn in weeks." She realized with a start that he was right. She had not locked her door since the night after they set Pedro's leg, had not even thought about it. "I didn't realize," she whispered. "I did. I notice everything about you, Zara. The way you hum when you're cooking, the way you watch the mountains when you think no one's looking, the way you smile when you read something that pleases you." He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I'm falling in love with you. Maybe I've been falling since that first letter. But I need you to know that my love doesn't come with demands or expectations. It just is." She stared at him, this good, patient man who had given her everything and asked for nothing. And she realized that somewhere along the way, between supper plates and quiet conversations and shared work under the vast Arizona sky, she had started falling too. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know. But I think I'm falling in love with you too." His smile was like sunrise, bright and warm and full of promise. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of restrained longing. When he pulled back, his eyes were shining. "We should probably get back to the dance," he said, his voice rough. "Probably." But they sat there for a few minutes longer, hands clasped, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The ride home was quiet, but it was the comfortable silence of two people who had said important things and now needed time to absorb them. When they arrived at the ranch, Quinn helped Zara down from the wagon and walked her to the house, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. Inside, Zara lit a lamp while Quinn checked that the doors were locked. They moved around each other in the familiar evening routine, but everything felt different now, charged with possibility. "I'll get your supper plate," Quinn said, heading to the kitchen. "Quinn, wait." Zara caught his arm. "You don't have to do that anymore. We could just eat breakfast together in the morning." "I know I don't have to, but I like bringing it to you. I like those few minutes at the end of the day, just us talking." He covered her hand with his. "Unless you want me to stop." "No. I don't want you to stop." "Good." He prepared a plate of leftover chicken and biscuits from the festival, and they walked together down the hall. At her door, Zara hesitated. "You want to come in?" she asked. "Are you sure?" "Yes." They sat on her bed, and Zara ate while Quinn told her about a letter he had received from a buyer interested in purchasing some of his cattle. It was mundane, ordinary, and perfect. When she finished eating, she set the plate aside and turned to him. "Will you stay for a little while?" "As long as you want." They lay side by side on top of the quilt, not touching but close enough that she could feel the heat of his body. They talked about everything and nothing, their voices soft in the lamplight. Quinn told her about growing up in Texas, about how he had worked odd jobs for years to save enough money to buy this land. Zara told him about her mother's laugh, about how her aunt had been the only stable presence in her chaotic childhood, about the dreams she had harbored of someday having a home that felt safe. "You have that now," Quinn said. "This is your home, Zara, for as long as you want it." "I want it forever." He turned his head to look at her. "Yeah. Yeah." He reached out and took her hand, and they lay there in comfortable silence as the night deepened around them. Eventually, Zara felt her eyes growing heavy, and she realized she was falling asleep. "I should go," Quinn said softly, starting to sit up. "Stay." The word was out before she could think better of it. "Please stay." He looked at her for a long moment, searching her face. "Zara, I don't want you to feel pressured. I don't. I just don't want to be alone tonight." "We don't have to do anything. Just stay." He settled back down, and after a moment she curled against his side, her head on his chest. His arm came around her, holding her gently, and she felt his heart beating steady and strong beneath her cheek. "Is this all right?" she whispered. "This is perfect." She fell asleep to the sound of his breathing, feeling safer than she had in her entire life. When she woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the window and Quinn was gone. For a moment, she felt a stab of disappointment, but then she smelled coffee and bacon. She rose and dressed quickly, then went to the kitchen to find Quinn at the stove. "Morning," he said with a smile. "Figured I'd make breakfast for once. You didn't have to do that. Wanted to. You've been taking care of me for weeks. Seemed like my turn." They ate together, and the domesticity of it made Zara's chest feel warm and full. This was what she had wanted all along, she realized. Not just safety, but partnership. Not just a roof over her head, but a home with someone who saw her as an equal. The days that followed established a new rhythm. Quinn still brought her a supper plate each night, but now he stayed for hours, sometimes falling asleep beside her fully clothed, other times kissing her goodnight and retreating to his own room. They were learning each other's boundaries, testing the waters of physical affection in careful increments. One evening in early September, as they sat on the porch watching a spectacular sunset, Quinn said, "I need to make a cattle drive to Tucson next month. It'll take about 10 days round trip. I was thinking you could come with me if you wanted." "Really? You'd want me to come?" "I'd love for you to come. I know it'll be rough, camping out and riding all day, but I thought you might enjoy seeing more of the territory." He glanced at her. "Plus, I'd miss you if I had to go for 10 days. "I'd miss you too. Yes, I'll come." The cattle drive was scheduled for mid-October when the weather would be cooler. In the meantime, Zara threw herself into preparations, making sure they had supplies and that the ranch would be fine in their absence. Tom would stay behind to watch the place and look after Pedro, who was walking again but still favoring his leg. The night before they were set to leave, Quinn came to her room with the usual supper plate, but he seemed nervous, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "What's wrong?" Zara asked. "Nothing's wrong, I just—" He set down the plate and pulled a small box from his pocket. "I got you something. Well, I've had it for a while, but I wasn't sure when to give it to you." She opened the box to find a silver locket on a delicate chain. When she opened the locket, she found a tiny photograph inside. It took her a moment to recognize the couple in the faded image. "That's my parents," Quinn said quietly. "Before everything fell apart. I know it's not much, but it's the only photo I have of them looking happy. I thought maybe you'd like to have it since you said your mother's things were all lost or sold." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Quinn, this is too precious. I can't take this. I want you to have it. Family isn't always about blood. It's about the people who make you feel like you belong." He took the locket from her trembling fingers and fastened it around her neck. "You're my family now, Zara. You and whatever future we build together." She threw her arms around him, and he held her close, his hand cradling the back of her head. When she pulled back, she looked up at him with tear-bright eyes. "Make love to me," she whispered. His expression grew serious. "Are you sure? I don't want you to feel like you owe me something because I gave you a gift. This isn't about the locket. This is about me trusting you, wanting you, choosing you." She took his face in her hands. "I'm sure, Quinn. I've never been more sure of anything." He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, and she felt the last of her walls crumble. They undressed each other slowly, learning the landscape of each other's bodies with reverent touches. Quinn was endlessly patient, constantly checking that she was all right, that she wanted to continue. And when they finally came together, it was with a tenderness that made her cry again, not from pain or fear but from the overwhelming rightness of it. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the moonlight, and Quinn traced the line of her collarbone with his fingertips. "I love you," he said. "I've been wanting to say that again, but I didn't want to pressure you." "I love you too." She kissed his jaw. "I think I started loving you the night you brought me that first supper plate. I didn't recognize it then, but looking back, that was when I began to see you as someone who cared about my comfort more than his own desires. I'll always care about your comfort. That's never going to change." They fell asleep wrapped in each other, and when morning came, they woke in the same position, facing each other in the pale dawn light. The cattle drive was an adventure. They traveled with a small herd of 30 head, Quinn and Tom driving the cattle while Zara rode alongside on a gentle mare Quinn had chosen for her. They camped under the stars, and Quinn taught her to read the constellations. They passed through changing landscapes, from desert scrub to grasslands to pine forests in the higher elevations. In Tucson, Quinn sold the cattle for a good price, and he took Zara to dinner at a proper restaurant. She wore the new dress he had insisted on buying her in town before they left, a deep blue that made her eyes look like emeralds. Over steak and potatoes, Quinn told her about his plans for the ranch, about maybe expanding the herd, about possibly raising horses. "I want to build something that lasts," he said, "something we can pass on to our children if we're lucky enough to have them." "You want children?" Zara asked, her heart racing. "Someday, if you do. No rush." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I just want a future with you, however that looks." "I want children," she admitted. "I used to be afraid of the idea, afraid I'd turn out like my father or that I wouldn't know how to be a good mother. But with you, I think I could do it. I think we could raise children who feel safe and loved." "We could. We will." The ride back to the ranch felt different, weighted with the promise of the future they had discussed. When they finally arrived home, dusty and tired, Zara stood on the porch and looked out at the land that had become hers. "Happy?" Quinn asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "Happier than I ever thought possible." The winter passed in a blur of hard work and deepening love. Quinn moved into the main bedroom, and they fell into an easy partnership both in running the ranch and in their marriage. Zara attended the quilting circles regularly and became close friends with Emily Porter. Pedro recovered fully and stayed on as a ranch hand, eternally grateful to Quinn and Zara for saving his leg. In February, Zara realized she had missed her monthly courses twice. She waited another week to be certain, then told Quinn one night as they lay in bed, "I think I'm pregnant." He sat up so fast he nearly fell out of bed. "You think or you know?" "I'm fairly certain. All the signs are there." His face split into the widest smile she had ever seen on him. "We're going to have a baby." "We are." He kissed her soundly, then placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "Hello, little one. I'm your father and I promise to love you and protect you for the rest of my life." Zara laughed through happy tears. "The baby can't hear you yet. Doesn't matter. I wanted to say it anyway." Doc Morrison confirmed the pregnancy a few days later, estimating the baby would arrive in late August or early September. Quinn became almost comically protective, insisting Zara rest more, refusing to let her lift anything heavy, constantly asking if she was feeling all right. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she told him one afternoon as he tried to stop her from hanging laundry. "I know, but I worry." "Don't worry so much. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "Not my baby, not my wife." She kissed him to stop his protests. "I love you, you overprotective fool." "Love you too." As her belly grew, Quinn became even more attentive. He rubbed her feet when they swelled, brought her crackers in the morning when nausea struck, read to her in the evenings from the growing collection of books he kept bringing home from town. And every night, he still brought her a supper plate, even though they ate supper together and even though she could easily get food herself. "Why do you still do this?" she asked one night in late June, her hand resting on her rounded stomach. He set the plate on the bedside table and sat beside her. "Do you remember the first week you were here, how scared you were?" "Of course. I wanted to help you feel safe, but I didn't know how. Then one night I heard you pacing in here, heard your stomach growling through the door. I realized you were so nervous about running into me that you were going hungry rather than come to the kitchen." He took her hand. "So I started bringing you food. It was such a small thing, but it felt like the only way I could take care of you when you wouldn't let me close." And now it's just our tradition. A little nightly reminder that I'm here, that I'm thinking about you, that you're cared for. Tears, which came so easily these days, filled her eyes. You're going to be such a good father. I hope so. I'm certainly going to try. Their son was born on a sweltering afternoon in late August 1883, after a labor that lasted 12 hours and left Zara exhausted but exhilarated. Quinn had stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, whispering encouragement, looking at her with such awe and love that it gave her strength to push through the pain. "He's perfect," Doc Morrison announced, placing the squalling infant on Zara's chest. "Got a good set of lungs on him." Zara looked down at her son, at his red face and dark hair and tiny fists, and felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. Quinn leaned over them both, touching the baby's downy head with one gentle finger. "Hello, son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Welcome to the world." They named him James William Calloway, after both their fathers, hoping to honor the good in their heritage while leaving behind the bad. From the first night, Jamie was a part of their nightly ritual. Quinn would bring Zara a supper plate, then sit with her while she ate and nursed the baby. They would talk in low voices about the day, about their plans for tomorrow, about how Jamie had smiled or grasped their fingers or done any of the small, miraculous things babies do. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Zara asked one night when Jamie was a month old. "If I hadn't gotten on that train, if you hadn't written to the agency, if I had run away instead of staying, all the time. And then I thank God you were brave enough to take a chance on a stranger." Quinn shifted Jamie to his shoulder, patting the baby's back with practiced ease. "You changed my life, Zara. This ranch was just a place until you made it a home. We made it a home together." "Yeah, we did." The first year of Jamie's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and endless wonder. They watched him grow from a tiny, helpless infant to a chubby baby who rolled and then crawled and finally, on a bright spring day just after his first birthday, took his first wobbling steps into his father's waiting arms. "Did you see that?" Quinn crowed, lifting Jamie high into the air. "He walked, Zara, he walked," she laughed at their matching expressions of delight. "I saw. Our boy's going to be running before we know it. And then we'll never have a moment's peace." But there was no complaint in his voice, only joy. That summer, Emily Porter came to visit with her own baby girl, Clara, who was 3 months younger than Jamie. The two women sat on the porch watching their children play on a blanket while they snapped beans from the garden. "You and Quinn seem so happy," Emily said wistfully. "I hope Jack and I can be like that someday. You're not happy, we're fine. We get along well enough, it's just not." She trailed off, blushing. "Never mind, I shouldn't complain." Zara set down her bowl and turned to face her friend. "Emily, what's wrong?" "It's just that Jack treats me more like a sister than a wife sometimes. He's kind and he provides for us, but there's no passion, no romance. I know I should be grateful for what I have, but sometimes I wonder what it would be like to have what you and Quinn have." "It wasn't always like this between us," Zara admitted. "The first weeks of our marriage I was terrified of him. I locked my bedroom door every night." Emily's eyes widened. "You did?" "I did. And he could have been angry or demanded his rights as a husband, but instead he gave me space. He brought me supper plates every night, just to make sure I was eating, just to have an excuse to check on me. He showed me through his actions that he was safe, that he cared about my well-being more than his own desires." She smiled at the memory. "By the time I stopped being afraid, I was already falling in love with him. That's beautiful. It's also a choice we make every day, to see each other, to care for each other, to put the other person first." Zara reached over and squeezed Emily's hand. "Maybe try talking to Jack. Tell him what you need. You'd be surprised what honesty can do for a marriage. After Emily left, Quinn came up behind Zara and wrapped his arms around her waist, nuzzling her neck. What were you two talking about so seriously? Marriage. Love, how lucky I am to have you. I'm the lucky one. He turned her in his arms and kissed her thoroughly. What do you say we put Jamie down for a nap and take advantage of some quiet time? She laughed and let him lead her inside. That fall, Zara realized she was pregnant again. This time, the news felt less shocking and more like a natural progression. Quinn was thrilled, Jamie was oblivious, and Zara found herself daydreaming about a larger family, about siblings playing together, about a house full of noise and laughter. Their daughter, Lily Rose Calloway, was born in May of 1885 on a morning so beautiful, it felt like the world was celebrating her arrival. She had Quinn's brown eyes and Zara's blonde hair, and from the moment she entered the world, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. She looks like you, Quinn said, cradling his daughter while Jamie climbed onto the bed to peer at his new sister. She looks like herself, Zara corrected, but she was smiling. Jamie, now almost 3 years old, was fascinated by the baby. Mine, he asked, touching Lily's hand. She's your sister, Zara explained. You have to help take care of her and protect her. Okay. Jamie nodded seriously, already taking his big brother duties to heart. As Lily grew, the house that had once seemed so large and empty became filled with life. Jamie was a boisterous, energetic boy who followed his father everywhere, constantly asking questions and wanting to help with ranch work. Lily was quieter, more observant, content to sit with her mother and watch the world with those solemn brown eyes. And through it all, Quinn continued to bring Zara a supper plate every night. Even when she insisted she was not hungry, even when they had eaten supper together just an hour before, even when both children were sleeping in their room and there was barely space to sit. He would bring the plate, they would talk for a few minutes, and then he would kiss her goodnight and either stay or go to check on the animals, depending on what the evening required. You know you don't have to do this anymore, Zara said one night when Lily was 6 months old. I know you're not going to let me go hungry. It's not about the food, not really. It's about these few minutes, just us, at the end of the day. He set the plate aside and pulled her close. The ranch is busy, the kids need attention, there's always something that needs doing. But this, our nightly supper plate, it's sacred time. It's when I get to focus on you and remember why I work so hard. I love you so much. I love you more. Not possible. He laughed and kissed her, and for a few precious moments, the world narrowed to just the two of them, the way it had in the beginning. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and celebrations. Jamie started helping with simple ranch chores, learning to ride and rope under his father's patient tutelage. Lily developed a love for books and would sit for hours looking at pictures and making up stories. In 1888, Zara gave birth to twin boys, Thomas and Henry, who brought even more chaos and joy to the household. 4 children, Quinn said one night, surveying the supper plate he had brought, which also included 2 cookies for them to share. When did we become a family of 6? Gradually, and then suddenly. Zara took one of the cookies and broke it in half, giving him the larger piece. Are you happy? Beyond my wildest dreams. He looked at her, and his expression was so full of love it made her breath catch even after all these years. Do you remember that first day, when you stepped off the train looking like you might bolt at any moment? I was terrified. I was terrified too. I thought I had made a terrible mistake, that you'd take one look at me and my rough ranch and get right back on that train. He touched the locket she still wore every day, the one with his parents' photo inside. But you stayed. You gave us a chance. Best decision I ever made. Second best. The first was locking that bedroom door. She looked at him in surprise. How can that be the best decision? I was shutting you out. You were protecting yourself, which was exactly what you needed to do, and it forced me to find other ways to show you I cared, to prove that I was worthy of your trust. He finished his half of the cookie and smiled. If you hadn't locked that door, I might never have started bringing you supper plates, and then we wouldn't have our nightly tradition. So you're saying my fear led to our happiness. I'm saying your courage to protect yourself until you were ready led to our happiness. There's a difference. He pulled her close and she rested her head on his shoulder. You were never broken, Zara. You were wounded, and wounds need time to heal. I'm just grateful you let me be part of that healing. Tears stung her eyes. You weren't part of the healing, Quinn. You were the healing. They sat together in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the sounds that had become home. From down the hall came the soft sounds of their children sleeping, and outside, the horses whinnied in their stalls. It was ordinary and perfect, and everything Zara had never dared to hope for. The children grew, and the ranch prospered. Jamie, at 14, was nearly as tall as his father and could handle most ranch work independently. Lily, at 11, had become a voracious reader and kept detailed journals about ranch life. The twins, now 7, were inseparable and constantly getting into mischief that drove their older siblings crazy and made their parents laugh. In 1895, on a cool October evening, Zara and Quinn sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. The children were at the Porter's ranch for the night, giving them a rare evening alone. Strange having the house so quiet, Quinn said, taking her hand. Peaceful. Zara leaned against him. Though I confess I miss the noise. They'll be back tomorrow full of stories about their adventures. He was quiet for a moment, then said, We've had a good life, haven't we? The best life. And it all started with a frightened woman, and a locked door and plates of food slid across a threshold. She turned to look at him, at the silver threading through his dark hair, at the lines time and weather had etched around his eyes, at the mouth she had kissed 10,000 times and would happily kiss 10,000 more. It started with a good man who saw past my fear to the person I could become if I felt safe. You were always that person. I just provided the space for you to find her again. That night, he brought her a supper plate as he had every night for 13 years. They sat together on their bed, the bed they had shared for more than a decade, and talked about everything and nothing. When the plate was empty, Quinn set it aside and pulled her close. Thank you, he said softly. For what? For getting on that train. For staying when you were afraid. For giving me a chance to prove I was worthy of you. He kissed her forehead. For making my house a home and my life complete. Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible. For showing me that not all men are like my father. For teaching me that love doesn't have to hurt. She kissed him, long and deep. For bringing me supper plates every night for 13 years, even though I haven't locked that door since our first month together. I'll bring you supper plates for the rest of our lives if you'll let me. I'll let you. They made love slowly, with the ease of long familiarity and the passion of deep love. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Zara traced the line of his jaw with her fingertips. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had been different people? If you had been cruel or if I had been unable to heal? Sometimes. But then I remember that we are who we are and who we are led us here, to this moment, this life, this love. He caught her hand and kissed her palm. I believe we were meant to find each other, Zara. Across all the miles and circumstances and fears, we were meant to be exactly here. I believe that too. Years continued to unfold like the pages of a cherished book. Jamie fell in love with the daughter of a neighboring rancher and married at 21. bringing home a sweet-natured wife who reminded Zara of herself at that age, hopeful and nervous, and trying to find her place. They built a small house on the edge of the property, and soon enough, Zara and Quinn became grandparents to a sturdy baby boy named Quinn James. "I can't believe we're old enough to be grandparents," Zara said, cradling her first grandchild. "Speak for yourself. I'm young and spry." Quinn tried to look affronted but failed, his expression too full of joy at seeing his first grandchild in his wife's arms. Lily became a teacher in Agua Caliente, educating the children of ranchers and townspeople with patience and creativity. She never married, claiming she was too independent for domestic life, but she was a beloved aunt to all the growing brood of grandchildren and a constant presence in Zara and Quinn's life. The twins, Thomas and Henry, went into business together, opening a feed and supply store in town that quickly became successful. They each married within a year of each other, and their wives became as close as sisters, the two families intertwined and constantly visiting the ranch. Through it all, Quinn brought Zara her supper plate every single night. Through good times and hard times, through droughts and abundant years, through the joys of grandchildren and the sorrows of losing friends to age and illness, that nightly ritual remained constant. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1902, Quinn surprised Zara with a new rocking chair for the porch, crafted from beautiful oak and carved with intricate patterns. "So we can sit together and watch our grandchildren play," he explained, setting it beside his own chair. "It's perfect." She ran her hand over the smooth wood. "Everything is perfect." That night, he brought her supper plate as always, but this time it included a slice of cake Martha Benson had made for their anniversary. They sat on their bed, gray now starting to silver their hair, their bodies softer and slower than they had been 20 years ago, but their love as strong as ever. 20 years, Quinn mused. "It feels like forever and like no time at all." "I know exactly what you mean." Zara set aside her plate and took his hands in hers. "Quinn, I need you to know something. That frightened girl who stepped off the train all those years ago, she's still inside me somewhere, but she's not afraid anymore. You gave me that. You gave me safety and love and a life I never dreamed possible. You gave me just as much. You turned this ranch into a home. You gave me children and grandchildren and a reason to work hard every day. You showed me that taking a chance on love, on trusting someone, could lead to something beautiful." He touched her face gently. "I love you, Zara. I've loved you since you were 22 and I was 28, and I'll love you when we're too old to remember our own names. Promise, promise." They kissed, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 20 years of history and the promise of however many years they had left. As they grew older, their children and grandchildren worried about them managing the ranch alone. But Quinn and Lily's oldest daughter, Rose, had fallen in love with ranching and moved into the house to help. She and her husband took over more of the daily operations while Quinn transitioned into an advisory role. Through it all, the supper plate tradition continued. Even when Quinn's joints ached and walking the hallway was harder than it used to be, he still brought Zara her plate every night. Even when Zara's hands were too stiff with arthritis to hold a pen, she still met him at the door with a smile. "You know I can walk to the kitchen," she told him one night when they were both well into their 60s. "I know, but why break a 30-year tradition, stubborn man? You love this stubborn man." "I do. God help me, I really do." Their grandchildren loved hearing the story of how they met, about the mail-order bride who locked her door and the cowboy who slid supper under it every night. As the story was retold and embellished over the years, it took on the quality of a fairy tale, a romance for the ages. But Zara and Quinn knew the truth was even better than the story. The truth was in the thousands of small moments that built a life together. It was in morning coffee shared in comfortable silence, in hands clasped during Sunday church services, in laughter over supper tables surrounded by family, in quiet conversations on the porch as the sun set over the mountains they both loved. It was in 30 years of supper plates, carried down a hallway with love, on a warm spring evening in 1912. 30 years to the day after Zara had first stepped off that train, Quinn brought her supper plate one final time. They sat together on their bed, older now and slower, but their eyes still lit with the same love that had sustained them through 3 decades. 30 years, Zara said, shaking her head in wonder. I thought I was traveling to my doom when I got on that train. Instead, I was traveling to my destiny. Our destiny, Quinn corrected. We built this together every day, one choice at a time. The best choice I ever made was staying that first night. The second best was unlocking that door. And the third best, loving you. She smiled at him, this man who had been her partner, her protector, her best friend. Always loving you. He set aside the supper plate and took her in his arms, and they lay together as they had done thousands of times before, finding comfort and joy in each other's presence. Outside, their grandchildren played in the yard, their laughter floating through the open window. The ranch stretched out around them, prosperous and thriving, a testament to hard work and love. And in the bedroom where it had all begun, where a frightened bride had once locked a door and a patient cowboy had refused to give up on her, 2 people who had found each other against all odds held each other close and gave thanks for the beautiful life they had built. Years later, when their children and grandchildren and even great-grandchildren told the story of Quinn and Zara Calloway, they always emphasized the supper plates, the symbol of persistence and care that had bridged fear and become love. But those who knew them best understood that the supper plates were just the beginning. The real story was in every day that followed, in every choice to see each other, to care for each other, to build something lasting together. The real story was in a love that transformed a rough adobe house in the Arizona territory into a home that would shelter generations. The real story was in trust earned one meal at a time, in fear overcome by patient kindness, in 2 wounded people who found healing in each other. The real story was simply this. A frightened mail-order bride locked the bedroom door, and the cowboy slid supper under it every night until she was ready to open it. And when she finally did, they built a life together that lasted until their final days, surrounded by the family their love had created and the legacy their partnership had forged. On Quinn's last evening, at the age of 87, he insisted on making Zara's supper plate one final time. Their children tried to stop him, worried about the effort, but he waved them away. Been doing this for 55 years, he said firmly. Not about to stop now. He carried the plate to their bedroom where Zara, now 81 and frail but with eyes still as green as spring grass, waited for him. He set the plate on the bedside table and climbed carefully into bed beside her. Still bringing me supper after all these years, she said softly. Always will. It's who we are. They held hands, their fingers intertwined, and watched the sun set one last time together through their window. And when Quinn passed peacefully in his sleep that night with Zara beside him, she held him close and whispered her thanks for the frightened girl she had been, for the brave cowboy who had seen past her fear, and for the supper plates that had become symbols of a love that lasted a lifetime. Zara followed him 6 months later, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried on the legacy of the Calloway Ranch. And in her final moments, she smiled, remembering that first locked door, those first hesitant conversations, the moment she had realized that the stranger she had married was the great love of her life. The ranch house still stands today, preserved by the Calloway family as a reminder of their origins. And in the hallway between two bedrooms, there hangs a photograph of a young couple, stern-faced in the way of old photographs, but with eyes that shine with unmistakable love. Beneath it, in careful script, are the words that have been passed down through generations. She locked the door. He brought supper. They built forever. And that, more than anything else, was the truth of Quinn and Zara Calloway, a truth that lived on long after the supper plates were put away and the bedroom doors stood open, a truth carried in the hearts of everyone who heard their story and believed, even for a moment, in the transformative power of patient love.